They say hunger can drive a man to madness. But what we found in the winter of 1887, in the shadow of the Wind River Range, that wasn't madness. That was something far older. Something that had been waiting in those mountains long before any white man set foot in Wyoming territory. My name is Samuel Pritchard, and I was part of the surveying crew for the Union Pacific Railroad's northern expansion route through Fremont County. What I'm about to tell you happened in the settlement of South Pass City, a dying gold town that should have stayed dead. We were warned. The Shoshone elder who came to our camp that October night, he told us in broken English, "When the first snow falls, do not go into the high country. Do not answer if you hear your name called from the trees, and never, never follow the sound of crying children." We laughed at him, called him a superstitious old fool. By December, only 3 of us were left alive, and I still hear it calling my name, even now, 40 years later, in the silence before dawn. This is what happened when we ignored the native warning.
The gold rush that had brought 10,000 souls to this high mountain valley had long since ended. By the time our surveying crew arrived, fewer than 100 people remained, scattered among the weathered buildings along Main Street and Willow Creek. The Smith Sherlock store still operated, though its shelves grew barer each week. The Sherlock Hotel stood like a rotting tooth against the gray sky, half its windows boarded up against the coming winter. Our crew of 12 men set up camp at the old Carissa mine site, about a mile north of town. The railroad wanted us to map a route through the high passes before the heavy snows came. We had maybe 3 weeks, our foreman Jack Holloway said. 3 weeks to chart 30 miles of mountain terrain. Jack was a thick-necked Irishman from Boston who'd worked on railroad crews from Kansas to Montana. Tough as coffin nails and twice as cold. He didn't believe in delays, excuses, or, as we'd soon learn, warnings. I was 23 years old, fresh from surveying school in Philadelphia. This was my first real job out west. My tent mate was a quiet German immigrant named Friedrich Weber. Fritz, we called him. He'd been a cartographer in the old country, and his maps were works of art, detailed down to individual pine trees. The others were a mix: railroad veterans, drifters, men running from something back east. There was Thomas Beckworth, a former Union soldier who never talked about the war. Miguel Cortez, who'd worked on the Southern Pacific Line through Texas. And young Billy Marsh, barely 18, who'd lied about his age to get the job. The Shoshone elder came to our camp on November 7th, 3 days after we had arrived. I remember the date because it was my birthday. My mother had sent a letter that arrived at the South Pass City Post Office on South Pass Avenue. The old man appeared at dusk, emerging from the pine forest like a shadow. He wore traditional buckskin clothing and carried a staff decorated with feathers and what looked like small bones. His face was deeply lined, his eyes clouded with age. But when he looked at us, I felt like he could see straight through to our souls. He spoke to Jack in halting English, his voice rough as gravel. "You must leave this place. The hungry season comes. The Wendigo wakes when the snow falls." Jack laughed. "Wendigo? That's just an old wives' tale, grandfather. We've got work to do." The elder's expression didn't change. "Your work will kill you. The Wendigo does not forgive trespass. It does not forgive hunger. Once it marks you, it will call to you. It will use the voices of those you love. And when you answer..." He made a gesture across his throat. He pointed to the high peaks to the northwest, toward the area we were meant to survey. "That is the Wendigo's hunting ground. For 3 generations, my people do not go there in winter. Not since the starving time, when men became something else." Jack gave him a silver dollar and told him to move along. The old man took the coin, looked at each of us in turn. I swear his gaze lingered on me, and said one last thing. "When it calls your name, put tobacco in your ears. Do not listen. Do not answer. Do not follow." Then he disappeared back into the darkening forest. We should have listened. God help us, we should have packed up that very night and left. But we were young, we were foolish, and we thought we knew better than the people who'd lived in these mountains for thousands of years. The first snow fell 4 days later.
November 11th, 1887. The blizzard came down from the high country like a white curtain, turning the world into a blur of wind and ice. We were forced to halt our surveying work and hunker down in camp. The temperature dropped to well below zero. The wind howled through the pines with a sound like screaming. We huddled in our tents, burning through our firewood faster than we'd planned. Jack sent Thomas Beckworth and Miguel Cortez into South Pass City to buy more supplies from the Smith-Sherlock store. They returned with bad news. The store was running low. The last supply wagon before winter had been delayed. If we stayed much longer, we'd be competing with the townspeople for dwindling resources. "We push forward tomorrow," Jack decided. "Storm or no storm, we're behind schedule." That night, I woke to the sound of crying. A child's crying, thin and desperate, coming from somewhere outside the camp. I sat up in my bedroll, my breath fogging in the freezing air of the tent. Fritz was awake too, his eyes wide in the darkness. "You hear that?" I whispered. He nodded. "A child. But there are no children in camp." The crying continued, moving around the perimeter of our camp. It sounded like a little girl, sobbing as if lost and terrified. My heart ached hearing it. Every instinct told me to go out there to help. Then I remembered the Shoshone elder's words, "Never follow the sound of crying children." I grabbed Fritz's arm. "Don't go out there. Remember what the old man said." But Billy Marsh, in the tent next to ours, didn't remember, or didn't care. We heard him stirring, heard the rustle of canvas as he opened his tent flap. "Billy, no!" I shouted, scrambling out of my bedroll. By the time I got outside, Billy was already 20 yards into the forest, following that heartbreaking sound. He had a lantern in one hand, and I could see his breath in the glow, see the snow swirling around him. "Billy, come back!" I yelled. He didn't even turn around. He just kept walking, faster now, the lantern light bobbing between the trees. The crying sound moved deeper into the forest, and Billy followed it like a man in a trance.
That was the last time anyone saw Billy Marsh alive. We searched for him at first light. Jack organized the crew into pairs, and we combed the forest in a grid pattern, calling Billy's name until our voices were hoarse. We found his lantern about a quarter-mile from camp, lying in the snow, still burning. But there were no prints around it. The snow had covered them, or there never had been any prints to begin with. We found something else, though. Fritz discovered it near a twisted pine tree, marks in the bark, about 7 feet off the ground, long, deep gouges like claw marks. But no animal I knew could reach that high while standing on the ground. And there was a smell. Even in the freezing air we could smell it, like rotting meat and something else, something sweet and sick that made your stomach turn. Jack wanted to keep searching, but the temperature was dropping again, and another storm was rolling in. We had no choice but to return to camp. That night we built the fires higher and kept watch in shifts. I took the midnight watch with Thomas Beckworth. We sat by the fire, rifles across our laps, watching the dark line of trees. The wind had died down, and the silence was absolute. No animal sounds, no wind, nothing. That's when we heard it. Samuel Pritchard. My name. Someone was calling my name from the forest. The voice was familiar. It sounded like my mother. Exactly like my mother, with her Philadelphia accent and the way she'd call me in for supper when I was a boy. "Samuel, sweetheart, come here. I need to show you something." I stood up. My legs moved on their own. Thomas grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. "That ain't your mother, boy. Your mother's 2,000 miles away." He was right. Of course he was right. But God help me, part of me wanted to go anyway, wanted to walk into those trees and find her. The voice called again, closer now. "Samuel, please, I'm so cold. Won't you help me?" Thomas shook me hard. "Look at me! Look at me!" His face was inches from mine, his eyes fierce. "That thing is trying to kill you. You understand? It's using your memories against you." I nodded, and he slowly released my arm. The voice called a few more times, then faded into the distance, but I could feel it out there, watching us, waiting. When Fritz came to relieve us at 2 a.m., Thomas pulled him aside and told him what had happened. "If anyone tries to leave camp tonight, you knock 'em cold. Understand? Better a broken jaw than whatever got Billy." Fritz nodded grimly. He'd brought his hunting rifle, and he held it like he meant to use it. None of us slept that night. We all heard the voices. Each man heard someone different, a wife, a mother, a child, a brother. The thing in the woods knew us somehow, knew exactly what to say to lure us out. By dawn, we'd made a decision. We're leaving. To hell with the railroad, to hell with the job. We'd pack up and head back to Lander, the nearest real town, 40 miles southeast. But Jack Holloway had other ideas.
"We're not going anywhere," Jack announced at breakfast. His face was haggard, his eyes bloodshot, but his voice was firm. "We've got a contract. We've got a job to do." "Jack, Billy's dead," Miguel said quietly. "Or worse. And something's out there. Something that ain't natural." "Billy was a fool who wandered off in a blizzard," Jack snapped. "Probably fell in a ravine. We'll find his body when the snow melts." "You heard the voices last night, Thomas," his hand resting on his rifle. "We all did. That wasn't no natural thing." Jack's face turned red. "I heard wind and tired men's imaginations. I've worked in these mountains for 15 years, and I've never seen anything that couldn't be explained by weather, wildlife, or whiskey. We're staying. We're finishing this survey.
and anyone who wants to leave can walk back to Lander on his own and explain to the Union Pacific why he broke his contract." Looking back, I think Jack had heard something too. I think whatever was out there had called to him, and it had terrified him so badly that he couldn't admit it was real. If he admitted it was real, he'd have to admit he was afraid. And Jack Holloway had built his entire life on never being afraid. So we stayed. God forgive us, we stayed. The next 3 days were a nightmare of tension and paranoia. We worked in groups of 4, never letting anyone out of sight. We surveyed the lower slopes, avoiding the high country where the elder had warned us not to go. Every shadow between the trees made us jump. Every crack of a branch breaking under snow made us reach for our weapons. The voices came every night, sometimes crying children, sometimes loved ones. Once I heard my father's voice, though he'd been dead for 5 years. The thing was learning, adapting, finding new ways to lure us out. On the 3rd night, Fritz didn't come to breakfast. We found his tent empty, his bedroll cold. His rifle was gone, but his coat was still there, hanging from a tent pole. No one goes out in November, Wyoming without a coat, not if they're in their right mind. We followed his tracks into the forest. They led northwest, toward the high country, toward the forbidden peaks. The tracks were strange. Sometimes they looked normal, sometimes they were too far apart, as if Fritz had been taking impossibly long strides, or as if he'd been carried. 2 miles from camp, we found him. He was hanging from a tree branch, 30 feet off the ground. His body had been opened, spread out like a grotesque flower. His face was frozen in an expression of absolute terror, his mouth open in a silent scream. But the worst part, the part that made Miguel fall to his knees and vomit in the snow, was that Fritz was still alive. His eyes moved. They tracked us as we stood below him. His mouth worked, trying to form words, but only a wet gurgling sound came out. Thomas raised his rifle. "God forgive me," he whispered, and fired. We cut Fritz down and buried him in the frozen ground near camp. It took us 4 hours to dig a grave deep enough. Jack said a few words from the Bible, but his hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the book. That night, we heard Fritz's voice, calling from the forest. "Samuel, Thomas, help me. It hurts. Please help me." Perfect, exact. His German accent, his cadence, everything. The thing had taken his voice. "That's it," Thomas said, standing up from the fire. "I'm done. Anyone who wants to come with me, we're leaving at first light. Jack, you can stay here and finish your goddamn survey alone." 6 of us agreed to go. Me, Thomas, Miguel, and 3 others. James Dutton, Robert Chen, and Patrick O'Malley. That left Jack and 4 men who were either too loyal or too afraid of breaking their contracts. "You're all cowards, yellow-bellied cowards. The Union Pacific will hear about this." "Tell 'em whatever you want," Thomas said. "I'd rather be a living coward than a dead hero." We packed light. Food, weapons, blankets. We'd make for South Pass City first, rest there, then push on to Lander. 40 miles through mountain terrain in November. It would be brutal, but we'd survive. We had to survive. We set out at dawn on November 18th. The sky was clear, the temperature brutal. Our breath froze in our beards. But we were moving, we were escaping, and that gave us hope. We'd gone maybe 5 miles when Miguel stopped suddenly. "Do you hear that?" We all fell silent, listening. At first I heard nothing. Then, faintly, from behind us, screaming. Men screaming in terror and agony. The camp. Something was happening at the camp. "We have to go back," Patrick said, his face pale. "No," Thomas said firmly. "That's what it wants. It's trying to lure us back." "But Jack and the others are already dead," Thomas finished, "and we will be too if we turn around." The screaming continued for maybe 2 minutes. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. We kept walking, but the hope was gone now. We all knew the truth. That thing wasn't going to let us leave. It was hunting us, and it was only a matter of time before it caught up.
We pushed hard, trying to put distance between us and whatever had destroyed the camp. The terrain grew rougher as we descended from the high country. The old wagon road to South Pass City was buried under 3 feet of snow, forcing us to navigate by landmarks, a distinctive rock formation here, a frozen creek there. By midday, we'd made maybe 8 miles. Not fast enough, not nearly fast enough. Robert Chen was the first to notice we were being followed. "There," he said, pointing back the way we'd come. "On that ridge. You see it?" I looked. At first I saw nothing but snow and pine trees. Then something moved. Something tall and impossibly thin, standing among the trees about a 1/4 mile behind us. Even at that distance I could tell it was wrong. Too tall, maybe 8 or 9 feet. Its limbs were too long, jointed in ways that human limbs shouldn't be. And its head? God, its head was all wrong. Too large, with what looked like antlers or branches growing from its skull. It stood perfectly still, watching us. "Move," Thomas said. "Now!" We ran, or tried to. Running through deep snow while carrying packs is nearly impossible, but fear gave us strength. We stumbled and fell and got up and kept going, our lungs burning in the freezing air. When I looked back again, the thing was closer. It moved between the trees with a horrible jerking gait, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on all 4s. It made no sound. That was the worst part. Something that large should have made noise, should have crashed through the undergrowth, but it moved in absolute silence. "There," Miguel shouted, pointing ahead. "The old Carissa mine buildings. We can ford up there." The abandoned mine structures appeared through the snow like a gift from God. We crashed through the door of what had once been the foreman's office, a sturdy log building with a stone fireplace and small windows. Thomas and Patrick immediately started barricading the door with furniture, while the rest of us checked the other rooms. The building was empty, except for some old mining equipment and a few rotting bunks, but it was defensible. We had walls, we had a roof, and we had weapons. "We hold here until dark," Thomas said, checking his rifle. "Then we move again. That thing, it seems to hunt at night. Maybe in daylight we'll have a better chance." We waited. The sun crawled across the sky with agonizing slowness. We took turns watching the windows, but we saw nothing. The forest around us was empty, silent. Even the wind had died. That's when the voices started again. "Thomas, Thomas Beckworth," a woman's voice, soft and pleading. "It's Sarah. I'm so cold, Thomas. Please let me in." Thomas went white. "Sarah's my wife," he whispered. "She died in childbirth 3 years ago." "Samuel, open the door," my mother's voice again. "I've come such a long way to find you." "Miguel, hermano, ayúdame," a man's voice, speaking Spanish. Miguel made a choking sound. "It's using our dead against us. It knows everything." Then the scratching started. Long, slow scrapes against the log walls, moving around the building, testing it. The wooden walls shuddered with each impact. "Hold your fire," Thomas ordered. "We don't know how many bullets we'll need." The scratching grew more frantic. Then came a tremendous impact against the door, like a battering ram. The barricade held, but barely. Another impact. Another. The door was splintering. "The windows!" Patrick screamed. I spun around. A face was pressed against the window, but it wasn't a face, not really. It was a nightmare of stretched skin and too many teeth, with eyes that glowed like coals. The antlers I'd seen earlier weren't antlers at all. They were bones, human bones, growing from its skull like a crown. Thomas fired. The window exploded, and the thing recoiled with a sound like nothing I'd ever heard. A scream that was part animal, part human, and part something else entirely. It sounded like 100 voices screaming at once. "Did you hit it?" Miguel shouted. "I don't know. The roof exploded inward. The thing came through in a shower of wooden shingles and snow, landing in the center of the room. Up close it was even more horrifying. Its body was emaciated, ribs showing through gray, leathery skin. Its hands ended in claws like railroad spikes, and its mouth opened impossibly wide, showing rows of broken, yellowed teeth. We fired. All of us, at once. The noise in that enclosed space was deafening. I saw bullets hit the creature, saw dark ichor spray from the wounds, but it didn't go down. It grabbed Patrick O'Malley and lifted him like he weighed nothing. Patrick's scream was cut short. The thing bit down on his throat, and I saw, God help me, I saw it drink. Saw Patrick's body shrivel and dry out in seconds like a plant in drought. "Run!" Thomas roared. We fled through the broken door back into the snow. Behind us the thing was feeding, making wet, horrible sounds. James Dutton slipped in the snow, and before any of us could help him, the thing was there. It moved so fast. 1 second it was in the building, the next it was on top of James, and then James was screaming, and then he wasn't. 4 of us left now. Me, Thomas, Miguel, and Robert. We ran blindly, no direction, no plan, just pure animal panic. The sun was setting, painting the snow red. We ran until we couldn't run anymore, until our legs gave out and we collapsed in a ravine, gasping for air that burned our lungs like fire. "We're not going to make it," Robert said flatly. "Are we?" Thomas didn't answer. He didn't have to. We all knew the truth. "There has to be a way to kill it," Miguel said. "The Shoshone, they've lived with this thing for generations. They must know how to fight it." The elder said not to go into the high country in winter. He said the Wendigo wakes when the snow falls. Maybe it sleeps in summer? Maybe we just have to survive until spring? Spring is 4 months away. We'll be dead in 4 days. "The town," Thomas said. "South Pass City. There are people there, buildings, supplies. If we can make it there, we can fort up. Strength in numbers." "How far?" Miguel asked. "Maybe 10 miles, if we push through the night." "Through the night?" Robert laughed bitterly. "That's when it hunts." "It hunts all the time now. Day, night, doesn't matter. Our only chance is to reach the town before it catches us again."
So we moved, through the darkness, through the snow, 4 exhausted men racing against a monster. We stayed close together, weapons ready, jumping at every shadow. Twice we heard it calling, once with my mother's voice, once with a child crying. We didn't stop, we didn't answer, we just kept moving. The lights of South Pass City appeared around midnight like stars fallen to earth. We'd made it. Against all odds, we'd made it. But as we stumbled down Main Street toward the Sherlock Hotel, we realized something was wrong. The town was silent, too silent. No smoke from chimneys, no lights in windows, no sounds of life. We found them in the hotel. All of them, the entire remaining population of South Pass City, maybe 70 people, gathered in the main room. They'd barricaded themselves in, just like we had at the mine. It hadn't mattered. The bodies were everywhere, dried out like mummies, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. The thing had gotten in somehow, through the chimney, maybe, or through the walls themselves, and it had fed. "Dios mío," Miguel whispered, making the sign of the cross. In the center of the room, written in blood on the floor, was a message in a language I didn't recognize. But somehow I understood it anyway. We all did. "The hungry season has come. The debt must be paid."
"Debt?" Robert said. "What debt?" Thomas was searching the bodies, looking for supplies we could use. He found something clutched in the hand of an old man I recognized as the proprietor of the Smith Sherlock store. A leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. "Listen to this," Thomas said, reading by lantern light. "It's dated 1856. The winter of starvation has ended, but the price was terrible. 23 souls lost. The survivors speak of a bargain made with the Wendigo spirit, that it would allow us to live, to take gold from these mountains, but that every 30 years, when the hungry season comes, it must feed. The Shoshone warned us. They told us this land was cursed, that the Wendigo had been bound here by their ancestors after the Great Famine, when men turned to cannibalism and became monsters themselves." 30 years, I said slowly. 1856 to 1886. That's 30 years, and we arrived in 1887. "The debt came due," Miguel said. "The town was supposed to, what, sacrifice people?" Thomas kept reading. "We have decided not to tell our children of the bargain. Let them live in ignorance. Perhaps the Wendigo will forget. Perhaps it will sleep forever." "But it didn't forget, and now we're paying for their cowardice," Robert said. "The elder said the Wendigo wakes when the snow falls, and it hunts in the high country. What if we could lead it away? Lead it somewhere it couldn't follow?" "Like where?" Thomas asked. "The hot springs, near Lander. The Shoshone consider them sacred ground. I worked on a survey there 2 years ago. The springs never freeze, even in the deepest winter. The ground is warm, the water is hot. Maybe it can't cross running water. That's a thing in the old stories, right?" It was thin. It was desperate, but it was all we had. We gathered what supplies we could from the dead town: food, ammunition, warmer clothes. We found a map in the hotel office showing the route to Lander and the hot springs beyond. 35 miles, through mountain terrain, in November, being hunted by a monster. "We should leave a record," I said, "in case we don't make it. Someone should know what happened here." So I wrote. I wrote everything, from the moment the Shoshone elder came to our camp to this very moment. I wrote it in the margins of the journal Thomas had found, in every blank space I could find. When I ran out of room, I wrote on the walls of the hotel.
"It's hunting us specifically now," Thomas said. "We're marked. If we split up, maybe some of us could escape while the others chase the others." "No," I said firmly. "We stay together. We all make it, or none of us do." Robert laughed, but there was no humor in it. Noble. Stupid, but noble. We left South Pass City at dawn on November 20th. The sun was bright, the sky clear, but the temperature had dropped even further. Every breath was painful, every step was an effort. The thing followed us. We couldn't see it, but we could feel it. A presence in the forest, pacing us, waiting for us to falter. McGill was the first to fall, not to the creature, but to exhaustion. He simply collapsed in the snow, his heart giving out. We tried to revive him, but he was gone. We said a quick prayer and kept moving. We had no choice. Robert was next. He stepped wrong, his ankle twisted, and he went down hard. Before we could help him up, the thing was there. It came out of the trees like a nightmare, moving with that horrible, jerking speed. "Go!" Robert screamed, pulling his pistol. "Go!" He fired 6 times as Thomas and I ran. I heard him scream. Then silence.
Just Thomas and me now. 2 men left from a crew of 12. We could see the steam rising from the hot springs in the distance, maybe 2 miles away. So close. So impossibly far. "Samuel," Thomas said, and I heard the resignation in his voice. "I can't make it. My lungs, I think they're freezing. Every breath is blood." "Don't you dare," I said. "Don't you dare give up now." "I'm not giving up," he said. "I'm giving you a chance." Before I could stop him, Thomas turned and walked back the way we'd come. He stood in the middle of the trail, rifle raised, facing the forest. "Come on then," he shouted. "Come and get me, you son of a bitch! I'm right here!" "Thomas, no! Run, Samuel! Run, and don't look back!" I ran. God forgive me, I ran. I heard Thomas firing, heard him screaming defiance at the thing, heard the screaming stop. I ran until I reached the hot springs, until I plunged into the sacred waters that steamed and bubbled even in the depths of winter. I ran until I collapsed on the far bank, in the territory the Shoshone had marked with painted stones and prayer bundles. And the thing stopped at the water's edge. I saw it clearly for the first time, saw what it truly was, not just a monster, but a man who had become a monster. I could see the human features beneath the horror, the shape of a face, the structure of a body. This had been a person once upon a time, someone who had been so hungry, so desperate, that they'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And in crossing that line, they'd become something that could never die, never rest, never be satisfied, cursed to eternal hunger, eternal hunting. It looked at me with those coal-fire eyes, and I heard its voice in my head, not with my ears. The debt is paid, for now. But the hungry season will come again. It always comes again. Then it turned and disappeared into the forest, moving north toward the high peaks where the Shoshone would not go. I made it to Lander 3 days later, more dead than alive. They found me collapsed on the main street, raving about monsters and debts and the hungry season. They thought I was mad. Maybe I was. The Union Pacific sent investigators to South Pass City. They found the bodies, found my writings on the walls. The official report called it a tragedy, a harsh winter, starvation, possibly a grizzly bear attack. The town was abandoned. The railroad route was changed. No one believed the truth. No one wanted to believe it.
That was 40 years ago. I'm an old man now, living in Philadelphia, far from those cursed mountains. I've tried to forget. God knows I've tried. But I can't forget, and I won't let the world forget. Because here's what I learned, what I need you to understand. The Wendigo is real. It's still out there in the high country of the Wind River Range. And the hungry season comes every 30 years. I've done the math. 1887 plus 30 is 1917, then 1947, then 1977, then 2007. The next hungry season is coming. Maybe it's already here. And when it comes, there will be disappearances. There will be deaths that can't be explained. There will be voices in the forest calling the names of people who should know better than to answer. If you ever find yourself in the high country of Wyoming in winter, remember what the Shoshone elder told us. Do not go into the mountains when the snow falls. Do not answer if you hear your name called from the trees. Do not follow the sound of crying children. And if you hear something that sounds like someone you love, someone who's dead or far away calling for help, put tobacco in your ears. Do not listen. Do not answer. Do not follow. Because the Wendigo is always hungry, and the debt must always be paid. I'm Samuel Pritchard. I'm 93 years old, and I'm the last man alive who knows the truth about what happened in South Pass City in the winter of 1887. Don't let my friends die for nothing. Remember this story. Believe this story. And whatever you do, don't ignore the native warnings.